margin. We knew it was going to be bad. I don't think Theresa May thought in her wildest nightmares it would be this bad. More reaction from Europe, if I might. Jean-Claude Juncker, co-author of the letter that was issued on Monday in an attempt to try and persuade MPs to support the deal, tweets this evening: "I take note with regret the outcome of the vote of the House of Commons this evening. I urge the UK to clarify its intentions as soon as possible. Time is almost up. Hashtag Brexit." So yet another senior EU official weighing in the aftermath of this vote with a palpable sense of frustration from Brussels as to what it exactly is the British Parliament and its members want to try and push this process forward in some kind of orderly way. Tomorrow, a crucial day, another vote at around about the same time, Shuli, and to discuss that a little bit further, it's very appropriate that I'm joined now by Mete Coban, a Labour Party councillor from Hackney, watching your leader in the House of Commons, no doubt with great interest. A vote of no confidence, presumably you and your cohorts desperate to see the back of Theresa May and her government. But tell me why you think it is that Jeremy Corbyn, as potentially a leader of a new government, can do a better deal than Theresa May.
Well, let's be absolutely clear firstly. We've wasted over the last 2 years a lot of time in going back and forth. There was no real intention to actually get a Brexit that works for the future generations. There was no intention to actually try to understand why people voted to vote Brexit in the first place. And I think actually when you look at the 2017 election, Corbyn's appeal to those hard-working class people who are suffering from the government's austerity plans actually give me more confidence for him to achieve a better Brexit deal.
Now, the mathematics are still against Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party in this vote. This time tomorrow we may be discussing a huge surprise, but I doubt it. So it will in a sense be back to square one. And one of the interesting things that Theresa May did promise, that assuming she survives this vote on Wednesday, she would then for the first time properly consult with leadership figures from other parties, we assume including Jeremy Corbyn. Do you think there is common ground? Can British Parliament, despite all its party differences, come up with some areas where they can agree on a deal to then go back to Brussels and say, listen, we've finally got our act together? Is there a chance of that?
Well, there is a chance of it happening, but let's be, again, clear. You know, she had 2.5 years to do this, to really come up with a consensus that can actually satisfy all different parties. Her intention isn't the right one. She's had a vote of a motion of no confidence in from her own party. We're going to see one tomorrow. I think it's time for her to step down and actually say, do you know what, let someone else lead this. Because even if we do it now, it's a bit like handing in your essay last minute. We've had 2.5 years to do this. Move aside and let us lead the Brexit negotiations.
One of the options that's back on the table in a very clear way is the idea of a second referendum. Let's assume that British parliamentarians cannot come up with a deal, cannot come up with some shared ground. One of the last-ditch options might be to throw it back to the British people. You're young. You were talking on behalf of young Labour activists. Presumably, I'm guessing, many of those, like many Labour MPs, want your party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, to support a second referendum. Do you think Mr Corbyn can eventually be persuaded to go for another vote?
Well, I don't think Corbyn is doing anything against the motion that was passed through conference in September.
He's not enthusiastic about it, though, is he?
Well, I mean, we still have to, try to come up with a deal that can work for the country. I think ultimately, if it gets to that point, you're right, you mentioned there was 2 million young people who didn't have the right to vote in 2016. Now they're eligible to vote. And I do think that ultimately, if the country gets to a gridlock, and a no deal becomes a real inevitability, then we should have a second referendum. But I think whilst we can, I think the Labour Party government can get a Brexit deal that works for the country, and I think we should give Jeremy Corbyn that opportunity.
Your best bet is still, hopefully, a victory in tomorrow's no confidence vote, a general election and a Labour Party government having another go at making a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, let's be one clear. We don't need to rush this process. We can extend Article 50. Let's be sensible about how we leave the European Union, because ultimately it's going to affect my generation for 30, 40 years' time. There's no need to rush this. And let's just take our time, go back to a general election. It's not just Brexit, the biggest issue in this country. We're seeing massive issues around austerity, about rebalancing our economy, our healthcare system. Let's give Corbyn the opportunity to come up with a Brexit deal that works for future generations.
OK, Mete Coban, speaking on behalf of the Labour Party and certainly part of your supporters in Hackney, thank you very much for joining us. A very appropriate time, given that there's going to be a very domestic flavour to what happens here tomorrow with this vote of no confidence. Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party hoping, I think against hope, that the numbers will